Okay.
Okay, we're live.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, Wayne, we're ready. Good evening. The January 26, 2021 regular meeting of the ISD 63 Roseville Area Schools School Board is hereby called to order. Clerk Johnson, could you please call the roll this evening?
Yes, Chair Boguszewski,
Here.
Director Anderson,
Here.
Treasurer Goggins,
Here.
Director Chu,
Here.
Director Shaw,
Here.
and Clerk Johnson is here.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any agenda adjustments, Mr. Superintendent?
There are no agenda adjustments. Thank you.
Great. We do have two announcements tonight that I'm aware of. So the first one, I'll just say a few words. Governor Walz, as some of us may know, has proclaimed this week as Paraprofessional Week in the state of Minnesota. And our own district is fortunate to have about 150 paraprofessionals that work in our schools who are among the more than 20,000 across the state. And as many of us know, our paraprofessionals support our students in so many different ways. In-class instructional support, working with individual students on learning objectives, helping organize and manage student activities, numerous other things. It's really true that paraprofessionals are integral to successful and effective learning and just, extremely needed and a benefit to our whole district. So we join Governor Walz in expressing our appreciation for what our paraprofessionals do. And so to all of our paras out there, thank you from the school board and from the district. We appreciate your service. The second announcement is going to be led into us by Principal Kristen Smith-Olson. Principal Smith-Olson, I'll let you do the honors of introducing and sharing with everyone what this is about.
Thank you, Chair Boguszewski and school board members and Superintendent Sicoli, Dr. Lake, Dr. Faber. I am so incredibly honored to be here to recognize Becky Ryan tonight. Becky received her National School Board certification, and I just want to tell you a little bit about that first. The overview of National Board is that every student deserves to be taught by an accomplished teacher. National Board certification was designed to develop, retain, and recognize accomplished teachers and to generate ongoing improvement in schools nationwide. It is the most respected professional certification available in K-12 education. And as a former school Nationals Board certified teacher, I let mine lapse, I am just over the moon that Becky has done this. Becky is an amazing, amazing science teacher at Parkview. She teaches 7th grade life science and 8th grade earth science. She actually has taught many other subjects at Parkview, but this is truly her passion. And I am so thrilled to recognize her tonight with her hard work, especially during this time of a pandemic, I must say. National Board certification work is more work than a master's degree, and Becky completed it in 1 year with 3 little kids and a pandemic going on. So she really deserves an amazing giant kudos and yay, rah, rah, Becky. So congratulations, and here's Becky Ryan. Awesome.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, School Board, Superintendent Sicoli. I couldn't have done it without the support of Kristen and the district. We had a little cohort working, and it really got me started and off the ground. And the Minnesota National Board Certified Teachers cohort was really helpful as well. But I've got a great team at Parkview and just an amazing work environment that allowed me to do what I needed to do to show my accomplished teaching. So thank you to all of you.
So welcome. All right. And Kristen, how many certified teachers do we have in the district? Do we know that offhand about what the number is? Because it's a pretty rare accomplishment, is my understanding.
Yeah, I have to say, with Julie not here anymore, I don't know the answer to that. I know that I have at least one other one in my building. I think there might be a few more around, but that's a good thing to find out, and I will look into it and let you know, because I'm curious too. I know I have a number of teachers working on it right now. As Becky said, there's a little cohort that lit the fire to do this, because it is quite an endeavor and quite a recognition. And the one thing I want you to know about this is that you are really judged by your peers, which is an amazing experience to have. You know, you have evaluations by supervisors, but it really is a panel of your peers that is telling you you're amazing.
Well, it's quite an accomplishment, Becky. Again, congratulations from all of us. So thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very
And
much.
hopefully, and I know this is a fact, you'll be an inspiration to others too. And I'm just also thankful that we have a district where we have teachers who are inspired to do this and feel the support is there sufficient enough to do it successfully. So thank you for once again taking that pathway. It's not an easy one. Thank you.
Good job, Becky.
I'll add in too, I saw a recent list of our board certified teachers, and I want to say it's about 10.
Okay. So yeah, so pretty,
Wow.
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 Tip top. There you go. Well, thank you so much. All right. With that, we have no one here. Do we have any community input this evening?
Not that I know of.
Great. Then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. Curtis, could you take the vote on the consent agenda, please?
Sure. Director Shaw,
Aye.
Director Chu,
Aye.
Treasurer Goggins,
Aye.
Director Anderson,
Aye.
Chair Bokoszewski,
Aye.
and Clerk Johnson says aye.
Cool. And Clerk Johnson, I believe you also are going to share the gifts this evening that we've received.
I am. Half a moment. Ooh. And I just had it here. Here we go. Okay. A financial gift from the EDW PTA for you for academic programming and classroom grants and other student needs. A financial gift from the Poland Family Foundation for first grade classroom at Parkview Center Schools. A financial gift from the Blockbod Giving Fund, Your Cause, for principal's discretion, also Parkview Center School. And a gift of winter clothing items for students in need to Roseville area schools from Do Good Roseville. So once again, we are just so pleased to have a district that has so many kind and giving people to education.
It's so helpful and so important. Thank you. Thank you all. With that, we'll move into our reports and non-action items. And the first on the docket tonight is Sherry Thompson, Director of Business Services, with an update on our 2021 budget. Sherry.
Sherry's muted.
Sorry. I want to make sure you're in. Okay, so it is that time of year, right? We've been working the last couple months. We roll from audit to revamping the current year budget. The budget that you adopted last June, the preliminary budget, was based on assumptions, of course, that we built last spring. So now we have revised the current year budget. And I just want to hit some of the highlights on the general fund. Again, this is just a summary, because when we put things together in the spring, we do make assumptions. And probably of any year that's looked a lot different in the fall and winter months, it would be this year with the ongoing pandemic. So,
Are we supposed to?
Sherry, yeah, were you still
Yeah.
trying to screen share?
yeah,
I'm
are
not
you
seeing
not
anything.
seeing it?
I'm not
No.
seeing it. I don't think we are.
Okay.
Just black.
Oh,
I
interesting.
see you.
Okay, so let's try this again. Can you see that?
Now, there you go.
Yes.
There we go. Yep. Great.
Okay. Okay. Yes, I'm working with too many monitors and I can't even see what I'm showing. So, okay. So looking at then our beginning audited fund balance, from July 1st of 2020, we started the year with a fund balance, an unassigned fund balance of $6,624,000. Again, we had some costs from last year, that some expenses that weren't realized. So we did start our year with a higher fund balance of about $3 million. Looking then at the revenue amount that you adopted on the preliminary budget was $103,382,643.
Sherry, may I interrupt?
Yes.
If anyone is not able to view the numbers, you can go to the top of your screen and hit view options on your computer screen and then increase the ratio of the size. Sorry for interrupting.
No. And that's the problem with not being able to see right now, like to see how, right, because I could have adjusted it here as well. So thank you, Dr. Lake, for pointing that out. So this year, and we've talked about this throughout the fall, this year we have seen a decrease and we've seen a loss in our students, primarily at the elementary level. We're down about 200 students from what we had projected when we built the budget. Aldo and I have talked about this, even thinking again of, as we built the budget, starting from when the pandemic started in March, here when we went to distance learning, even then looking at our enrollment, we look at our enrollment all of the time. We continue to look at that enrollment weekly throughout the summer, even, in June at board or budget adoption time. I guess who would have thought even then, being that it is a pandemic, that at that time, I think, at least me personally, was thinking, gee, will school start in September? Will it start a couple weeks late? So again, we continue to deal with the pandemic. So we have seen a loss in students, and this isn't unlike what other school districts are experiencing as well. So again, we are adjusting that revenue down for the loss in students. We're adjusting that down by $2.4 million. At the same time, we are seeing some one-time dollars that have come to us through the CARES funds, through the federal government. And I'll talk a little bit more about this. I want to touch a little bit on this because we'll be seeing some additional dollars. And we have recognized, and the thing is, when we're talking about federal dollars, we don't recognize the revenue until the year in which we're incurring an expense, because these funds do have targeted areas, right, where we spend these dollars. So we did receive, and we've talked about this, we've presented previously, we did receive about $2.3 million in Corona or COVID relief funds. And that was really to help kind of the startup or the reopening of schools. Those dollars had to be spent between July 1st and December 31st of 2020. So these dollars, the dollars came in to support childcare costs, also technology, and that would be student devices, as well as staff devices. We were not set up to function as a one-to-one, especially with our students in the elementary. So we've handed out many devices. Also funds to for a COVID coordinator, added nursing costs. So that's what really all of this revenue, the $2.3 million, was directed towards. In addition to that, we have received some other COVID dollars, and I'll touch a little bit more on that after I work through the summary document. And we received $364,000, and we'll see when we get to the expenses below that we're really using those funds. Again, these are one-time funds, and we're going to use these funds to provide like floating substitutes, floating teachers. Now that, again, because we are coming back in school, so to provide those added supports and coverage for when staff are out sick, or to kind of get that all hands on deck where they're needed. And again, these funds are used to support that. So overall, when you look at the subtotal of our changes, just in a total dollar amount, it's an additional $250,000. So that takes our revised revenue up to $103,631,000. But now we move to the expenditure side. The board again adopted a preliminary budget of $103,394,000 in the unassigned. So last spring, you adopted pretty much a balanced budget. Again, we build that budget in the spring, anticipating, of course, retirements, who we're going to hire. There's things that we don't know, who will be in what position. Also looking at our anticipated contracted services costs. So when we actually went through and revised the budget, and I would say, we're doing this in December, January is when we started this work. So we still take a conservative approach. And again, looking at bringing kids back to school again. Our net adjustments from the original budget is an additional $306,000. So that would be the net of those increases from preliminary to final, or to revised rather. And we will continue monitoring all of these. I mentioned above this $2.3 million. Again, that ties into the revenues that I mentioned above as far as reopening the schools and the costs related to that. Here's and then the $364,000 for the floating teachers and substitutes. Again, with any of these federal dollars, we can't recognize that revenue until we have an expense associated with it. So that's why you see these funds tie out exactly. And these I will mention, or I can't stress enough, are one-time funds. So overall, again, looking at this, our changes to our expenses, or looking at the subtotal here, is about 2.975 as far as added changes. So this takes our expenditures up to $106,370,615. Of course, with the revision in our revenue, with the loss in the pupil units, our net difference, rather than a balanced budget, we're looking at a deficit of about $2.7 million. So we saw a higher fund balance as of June 30th, 2020, much of which was related to the impact of COVID, because we weren't hiring substitute teachers in our in the third trimester last year. So we saw that fund balance inflate, but we're seeing a lot of it then come down in the current year. Again, the impact of COVID, and much of it is the loss in student revenue. So we are anticipating a general fund unassigned fund balance of about $3,885,000. This is about 3.9 or 4%. So we remain above the targeted or our fund balance policy of 3%. But again, we will be deficit spending.
Hey, Sherry.
Yes.
And I hate to make you explain the federal funds again, but I think I missed something when you talked about the 2.3. I understand that, I mean, under expenditures, I mean, we actually have defined COVID costs, correct?
Correct.
So can't we use the federally defined federal dollars to cover some of those? I mean, I guess I missed something. I'm understanding the same exact number in revenue and expenditures, but I mean, aren't we getting help with some of those COVID costs? I missed something. Sorry.
No, and you are exactly right. And that's actually, the timing on that was perfect, because I'm going to kind of further follow up a little bit on these federal dollars.
Okay.
So
sorry for jumping the gun.
No, that's a good question. You would think we had rehearsed it. So can all of you see this tab? These CARES funding sources, can you see this tab? This is the second worksheet that's in your packet.
Yep.
And so there are different, there are some different, again, these are all federal sources. So, and that's why I say, and that's maybe some of the confusion, right? I mean, overall, right now, and we are waiting, there's a big if on this or on solidifying, confirming this $5.6 million that we currently have in 2021, 2022. So I hate to jump so far into the presentation. I should start at the top. I realize that, but that's a preliminary estimate, and we're waiting for final word on that. And I'm hoping to get that clarification by the end of next week. So overall, over multiple years, at this point, we are estimating that we will receive about $9.5 million in CARES funds, right? But again, they're directed to offset the impact of the pandemic, much like the other federal programs. So, and we do have some flexibility where we spend things going forward. So the first thing, and hopefully, Todd, this answers some of your questions. We did have, right, we've added the 8 long-term subs. So that's an added cost. So we've got the $364,000 to cover that added cost.
Okay.
So the net impact on our budget then on overall at the end of the day will be 0, because we've added the expense, but we've also added the revenue. This pot of $2.3 million, again, that had to be spent within the 6-month period. And those were added costs. The cost of childcare was about $500,000. Technology, COVID coordinator. So all of these, and again, we had to spend those by December 31st. So we've got about $2.7 million this year that we're looking at. We're recognizing the revenue, but then also the expense. We do have some flexibility. There are some guidelines, because then we still have a remaining $6.8 million. The dollars that are up here, the $191,000 and the 973,000, the different CARES pots, we can use those to offset our continued operating expenses. They don't have to be additional expenses. We can supplant our budget on this, because there again, these dollars, many of these dollars are to assist us in getting through the pandemic. It doesn't necessarily need to be an added expense. It can help offset our deficit spending in the programs that we have. And we're looking at a variety of ways to address this. Again, some of these dollars we will use to offset our costs that are actually already in the budget for next year as we develop that budget. So if we have deficit spending, we'll be looking at offsetting that. And in part, some of that is, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about budget parameters later in this meeting. But, getting that enrollment back, because our enrollment, we anticipate, won't be at 100% next year. So it helps to get us through that period. And in addition to that, we're also looking at some additional programming, whether that be in the summer, after school. So that's what we're looking, that's where we're looking to invest these dollars, this remaining $6.8 million. We have until this first 1.5 million roughly, the first three lines here, we have until September 30th of 2022 to spend those dollars. And then our most recent award of $5.6 million, we can spend those dollars up through September 30th of 2023. So we have some flexibility in when we spend those dollars. So Todd, does that address some of your questions?
Yeah, that helps. I'm just so it'd be correct in saying that I know on paper we dropped an unassigned fund balance of 6 point whatever it was. I mean, I know
yes,
on paper we dropped down to 3.94, which is still better than our goal, but it certainly seems like we have better than 3.9 if theoretically, I guess. Or, I mean, depending on the costs that come in. I just wanted to clarify, because I didn't know about the grand total of 9.5 there under column E.
Yes. So yeah, we just received word on that about a week and a half ago, I think, but we're waiting for final word. And again, those dollars are not only, the CARES dollars are not only set aside or are out there to help offset increased costs, and it's also sustainability, right? As far as getting through the pandemic, they are one-time dollars.
So Sherry, so the 2021 column that adds up to 2,669,177.
Yes.
Those dollars are already accounted for in the budget adjustments on the previous page. So we're at that 2.7 million deficit, even with that 2.6 million counted in.
That is correct.
But the 2021-22 isn't, because we haven't spent that yet. So my question is, so 2021, the 2 million, do we have it? Like, did it come to us? Has it been delivered?
Yes, it has been delivered.
And then the 6.8 for 21-22, that's not delivered yet, right? That's more like a line of credit that we can spend up to that.
Correct. We can't draw it until we spend it. That's the way that it works with the federal dollars.
Got
and
it.
Typically,
and then,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish up.
No, typically the federal dollars, typically you supplement your existing programs. In the case like right now with the CARES, because of the pandemic, again, they're actually used and intended to supplement your budget.
Got it. And then
because of the negative impacts.
Yeah, and then my final question on the 21-22, the 6.8 million relates to, you probably can't answer this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is that at risk at all politically, or is there is that it? Like, it's promised and done, or if, different kind of packages change at the congressional level or whatever, is that at risk, or can we pretty much count on that if we can spend it appropriately?
We can count on this. This was part of the CARES Act that was passed in in December.
Okay.
So that has been finalized. And I think one other thing that I want to point out is this $2.3 million that's in the current year, the 2021, the majority of those are one-time costs.
Right.
Right? They're not,
Right.
they won't carry forward to the next year.
Right.
Because again, a lot of it was technology and getting things in the hands and PPE and.
Yeah, it's one-time relief to help us with one-time, we hope, expenses because they're related to, we hope, a one-time pandemic.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Jerry, I have a question, and that
Yeah.
is the reason that our fund balance went down this year, 2021, is because of lower enrollment.
Yes.
Are the CARES funds at all tied to enrollment? What establishes the size of those numbers?
So that's a great question, Frank. What actually, they are all based, they're actually based on kind of what the formula that they use for Title I. So these were developed based on our free and reduced counts and percentages as, excuse me, as of October 1st of 2019, because that's the most recent data that the federal government had.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments for Sherry? Doesn't appear so.
Yeah. Actually, I have a question, Sherry. So you were talking about the substitute teachers, and now we have some funds to bring some back. What happened then next year? With some of the funding that we get, continue to fund them, or is that a one-time thing?
So that is really a one-time thing.
Okay.
And our hope is, right, that by next fall and all of these things, we've learned a lot in this last year, that we will continue to monitor this situation. Because there again, a year ago, or even 9 months ago, who would have thought that we would be where we are now?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sherry. Kitty.
Your update on the budget was really based on what we solidly knew as of last week. I mean, you're sharing this additional information on dollars, but that hasn't been baked into the budget update. You talked about potentially doing some additional after school and summer school programming. Would that then be another adjustment to this budget? Or, I mean, because if that would still be this fiscal year, would it not?
Yes. So if programming is developed, and again, so a lot of times what happens prior to June 30th is this year, and what happens July 1 and after is next year. So it could impact like summer school programming or even after school programming as things progress. If it happens, if we are planning something for prior to June 30th, we will be coming back to you with another budget revision. Typically, we only revise the budget once during the year, but this is not a typical year. So if that's the case, we would be coming back with another adjustment.
Thank you.
Wise, if it were to all go into next year, we would obviously build that into the preliminary budget for next year.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Looks like we're good. Sherry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.
Next up, it looks like Superintendent Sicoli will introduce some of his team to talk about eliminating opportunity gaps, metrics and strategies around that, and the community conversations and student voice presentation. Dr. Sicoli.
Yes, thank you, Chair Boguszewski. So At the November 10th school board work study session, the school board discussed its annual self-evaluation, and considerable time was spent on these three topics. What are we doing to eliminate opportunity gaps? How are we connecting with our community? And how are we amplifying student voice? And so we also recognize that with this pandemic, it wasn't our normal reporting of different measures and strategies was in some cases altered, delayed because of the work that had to be done to really reinvent the way we deliver education on short notice. So I thought it'd be a good time to present a report. So we've been working on this for a few months. That shows some of that. This is not meant to be a comprehensive report of everything we're doing, but it is hopefully meant to provide an overview and a sense of how things fit together in our efforts in these three areas. And I would ask, this is my colleagues and I, there'll be a number of us presenting at different parts. It's a rather lengthy presentation, so if possible, I would ask the board to hold questions or comments till the end so we can get through this, please. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So we're going to start with the first of those three areas, opportunity gap, and look at some metrics and strategies. So as we move on to the next slide, you'll see this is our normal reporting on some of the measures that we do throughout the school year. And some of these got delayed and didn't happen this last year. In addition, in some recent years, we've also, not all, but we have on at least a couple of occasions presented overall on efforts in our strategic plan. So that didn't happen in the last year either. So if we move on, I will hand it off to Jake Fondolindi.
Thank you, Dr. Scully and school board. To start our presentation, we want to share some data that we've previously shared with the board in our monthly school board reports, as Aldo talked about. This first slide focuses on the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment in Math. And please note that the data was taken from the previous 3 years of MCA data, with the most recent being the 2018-19 school year, because we didn't administer the MCAs last spring during the pandemic. So the top left graph shows math proficiency at Harambe Elementary. And you can see that our Black students, represented by the red line, and multiracial students, represented by the light blue line, are reducing the achievement gap compared to our white students in the dark blue line. Notice that all groups continue to improve their proficiency. That is what we really want to see in our data. All student groups continuing to improve their proficiency. However, we want to see that accelerated growth for our historically underserved students. The top right shows an example at Emmett D. Williams Elementary between special education students in the orange line and their general education peers in the green line. You can see our special education students are showing accelerated growth towards the general education students. And at the bottom graph shows multiracial students increasing math proficiency, which is the light blue line, compared to our white students, which is the dark blue line, at Roseville Area High School. This next graph, or this next slide, I should say, shows three graphs that have proficiency progress in MCA reading in three different schools than the first slide. So the top left graph shows proficiency increases at Little Canada Elementary in reading proficiency. We see Asian students in the blue line, Black students in the red line, and multiracial students in that light blue line, compared to our white students in that dark blue line. You can see these three groups showed increased proficiency that are closing achievement gaps. The top right graph provides a look at Roseville Area Middle School, where our Asian students with that blue line and multiracial students in the light blue line are making proficiency gains and closing the gap with our white students that are shown by that dark blue. The bottom graph shows our Black students with that red line improving in reading proficiency, while our white students also show growth at Parkview Center School. Although these two slides show promising results, we know that we still have a lot of work left ahead of us. We'll continue on. So switching gears to some different data. This slide shows our most recent data for office discipline referrals. The unduplicated count means that each student is only counted once in the data. So this graph provides a look at the representation between that student population that was referred to the office to the percent of that student population overall. When we look at this data, we look for a representative proportion, which would put each student group at that 1.0 line. So in this graph, white students, which are represented in that dark blue line, and Asian students in that just the blue line, are underrepresented, while our Black students that are represented by the red line, Hispanic students in green, and all student groups, students of color group, which is that orange line, are overrepresented. However, you can see since the 2013-14 school year, we've seen a steady decline in the overrepresentation of Black students in our office referrals. On to the next slide. So this next slide shows over and underrepresentation again, but this time we're looking at suspensions by our student groups. So in looking at the data, you can see that the underrepresentation from our white students, which is that dark blue, and our Asian students in light blue are underrepresented, while Hispanic and Black students are overrepresented. However, we do see a general decline for our Black students over time. And we want to acknowledge that the gap is still too large, and we're working to continue declines with the ultimate goal of having no over or underrepresentation for any group. On to this next slide, we continue to see over and underrepresentation, but this one is actually a focus on our student population for special education students that are served in special ed. Again, we're looking for that, that representation of 1.0 for all of our student groups, which would mean that proportionate amount being served for populations of students. While in this data line, you see in that light blue that our white students are served in a proportionate amount, and we see underrepresentation in our Asian students, which is that red line. And we also see a decline in that overrepresentation for our Black students, which is the purple line, and Hispanic students, which is that green line over time. Going to our next slide. This is another incredibly important statistic, which is our student graduation percentages. You know that this data can be life-changing for students, as we know students who receive a high school diploma have a higher expectancy to earn that livable wage in their adult lives. So this is our most recent graduation data from the graduating class of 2019. We will receive our 2020 graduation data in February or March of this year and have that information as a part of our graduation and post-secondary report later on this spring. But this particular data set looks at our groups of students and their graduation percentages compared to the statewide graduation percentages. The statewide average is the dark blue bar, while the Roseville area schools data is in the light blue. And as you can see, all of our student groups graduate above the state percentages with the exception of our Asian student group. And our final data slide is the representation of student groups by race in our college credit-bearing courses. These are college credit-bearing courses that are taught at our high schools by our teachers, and they include all AP courses, college in the schools courses, college articulated and concurrent enrollment courses. Again, these are courses that we are teaching within our high schools. In this slide, you can see again that we're looking for that 1.0 proportion from our student representation, with most of our student groups in that school year, 2018 to 2019, you'll see very close to a representative number for our student groups. We still have some underrepresentation from our Hispanic group of students in that green line, and Black students represented in the purple line, as well as American Indian students in the blue line, but we continue to improve in this area. So I am done droning on about the data, but I want to thank you for reviewing this portion with me. And we wanted to show how that data relates to our continued effort to provide an equitable anti-racist education for our students to close opportunity gaps. And in these upcoming slides, you'll hear more about the actions that we're taking to put us on the right path. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Favor.
Thank you, Director Von der Linde. Board Chair Bogoshevsky, board members, Superintendent Sicoli. We're going to spend time today, this evening, looking at what we consider the meat of what we do. Part of that is how we monitor progress around achievement and the impact of our instruction. During this process, during this section of the presentation, we'll look at instruction, instructional practices. Monitoring progress team consists of the 2 assistant superintendents, director of special ed, EL representation, Florence Odegaard and title programming, and teaching and learning. Along with that, we work closely with the regional centers of excellence. Regional centers of excellence helps us look at our data, helps us review our intentionality around our processes and systems that are in the way, that are impacted, and moves us towards a greater understanding of how our instruction has impacted student achievement. Next up, professional learning communities, and Melissa Sonic.
Thank you, Dr. Favor. Good evening, everyone. To support opportunity gap reductions in our professional learning communities, I'd like to share 2 different initiatives that we're working on. First, we have created common formative assessment data collection system that will allow us to desegregate data by grade, school, and as a district. This data desegregation tool is centered around student growth, focusing on academic state standards and math. It was created by a teacher leader, and this fall was shared across the district. This dynamic data collection system has helped teachers view their data in real time for their students, and then they can also desegregate it by race, by English language learners, and students receiving special education. This data has a direct impact on that teacher's teaching, but more importantly, on student learning. We are also developing a data analysis protocol that incorporates questions for collaborative teams to ensure that race-based data analysis is taking place within our professional learning communities. Some examples of these questions prompt educators to consider things like, what do you notice about the data based on race? Or as we prepare for interventions and extensions, are the instructional methods culturally responsive and inclusive? Or how will we take responsibility individually and collectively if Black, Indigenous, and students of color are not learning? These questions will help us live into our value of equity in all we do. With that, I'll turn it over to Florence and Christina to talk a little bit more about site improvement plans.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Florence Odegaard. I'll talk about school improvement planning. We strive to reduce opportunity gaps through the school improvement planning process and implementation of our school improvement plans. As Dr. Favor mentioned, this past year, we have collaborated with the Regional Centers for Excellence to improve our planning process. The planning process usually starts in late spring. Each school uses data analysis protocols to examine various forms of data they have collected throughout the school year, as well as trend data. Such data include non-academic data, such as attendance and office referrals, perception data, such as surveys from families, students, and staff, and academic data, such as standardized assessments and common formative assessments. School leadership teams disaggregate the data by race, gender, students on free and reduced price meals, students receiving special education, and English language learners. Schools identify areas of success as well as areas for growth and prioritize 1 to 3 areas to focus on, then set improvement goals. These goals are also known as site goals. For example, this year, Brimhall Elementary School identified math as an area of focus and set a goal for 68% of students in grades 3 through 6 to be proficient in Math Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments. Part of the goal involves reducing the achievement gap for Black students by 20% and for Latinx students by 30%. Additionally, schools identify specific action steps to implement throughout the school year to help them attain their goals. Schools also have systems in place to monitor their progress towards goal attainment. Christina?
Mm-hmm. So an important part of this work is the continuous improvement cycle, which is based on the plan, do, study, act cycle. Basically, whatever the the school leadership team decides as an innovation to reduce the opportunity gap, the teacher teams take that innovation and plan to implement it in their teacher teams. They do the implementation, they study how it worked, what the outcomes were for students, and then they revise it or tweak it, and that is their action. They also share this information with the school leadership team so that there is a continual cycle of a feedback loop telling the leadership team if their innovations are working and how things are changing over time.
Next slide. We continue to strive to align our initiatives. In the previous slide, I talked about site goals. At the beginning of the school year, each teacher sets a teacher growth goal, and teachers and collaborative teams set student goals. These student goals are also called team goals. As teachers set their goals, a concerted effort is made to align their goals with their school's site goals. As you may recall from the previous slide, Brimhall's site goal is focused on math and achievement gap reduction for Black and Latinx students. In alignment with the site goal, first grade collaborative teams at Brimhall also focus on math and achievement gap reduction for Black and Latinx students. Collaborative teams identify specific steps or action steps to help them achieve their goals. Building administrators support teachers by providing specific feedback and coaching through formal and informal observations. Additional support include peer observations and equity-focused coaching from lead teachers. Next slide.
Using our school improvement planning practices that has been discussed and our PLCs as a guide, we offer ongoing reflection in primary areas around instruction. The strategies of inclusive curriculum, absent narrative, align with our compass as our guide. Equity pedagogy, culturally relevant content, social justice, and collective knowledge creation, where we have set majority of our time this past year around collective knowledge creation so that we are inclusive of members of the community and students can see themselves in the curriculum and the content. Next slide.
Sorry, I just had to unmute. So coupled with our culturally inclusive teaching strategies from the previous slide that Dr. Favor shared, the following instructional practices on this slide provide examples of embedded equitable practices. We continue to bridge opportunity gaps starting with our youngest learners and have been working as a pre-K to kindergarten committee to align our practices between those two programs. At our elementary schools, we continue to incorporate best practices in teaching young students focused on engagement strategies and inquiry. To note, Harambe Elementary received the prestigious Turnaround Arts Grant, which has brought additional funding for and a focus on how arts education can relate to and engage all students, and has brought exciting projects and performances to Harambe. Additionally, the Dual Language Immersion Program, which began with 2 classes of kindergarten students at Little Canada and has now grown through 8th grade at Rams, and our 8th grade students just registered for their DLI 9 course starting at Roz. The program provides a 2-way immersion experience to improve language learning for our native Spanish-speaking students. 2-way immersion programs have been shown to reduce opportunity gaps between English speaking and native language speakers. Also, our equitable practices have been enhanced and furthered by our partnership with the National Urban Alliance at Central Park, Harambe, and Rams. We've also partnered with Hamlin University to train classroom teachers on how to improve our practices with English learners in their general education classes through our ELM coaches, which each school has an ELM coach. Finally, our staff have worked incredibly hard to continue the excellent education that students deserve while in the distance learning format, providing students with their technology needs, reaching out to families with support, going to students' homes to check in with them if they haven't heard from them in a while, and distributing food and materials to make sure students and families have what they need during these challenging times has been an effort by our whole staff. And continuing on to the next slide, we have multi-tiered systems of support. And multi-tiered systems of support, or frequently called MTSS, are often represented as pyramids. You'll see them throughout the literature as a triangle or pyramid, with the bottom tier, or tier 1, being the largest section and focused on core instruction of what all students get. That second level, or tier 2, applies to less students and provides more focused intervention, while the top tier, or tier 3, provides intense, usually individual interventions for students. The following bullet points are shared just some of our supports for students in all 3 of our tiers. In all of our elementary schools, we do receive some additional funding through ADSIS to support school staff to work with students in reading, math, and behavior to support tier 2 and 3 interventions. In reading, we do this through our press interventions, and in math, we expanded our staff small group interventions while we continue to support students' behavior through behavior interventions throughout the district. And specifically, Central Park this year has a student success coordinator to support their professional learning community work and MTSS work. We've also partnered with the Minnesota Reading and Math Corps to provide elementary students with intervention in small groups. And as a part of our elementary program review 3 years ago, we implemented the What I Need time at each of our sites. Fairview Alternative High School also has adopted this model of What I Need. The What I Need time could be titled differently at each site, but the basic tenets is that our schools provide a time for relearning, reteaching, and extension based on student need. This time is built into their schedules and is part of the professional learning community process, where teachers provide instruction, assess their students, and then use the data from that assessment to flexibly group students based on their instructional need. Another tier of support at the middle level is providing the opportunity for students to participate in advanced options. These options provide increased rigor or further exploration of topics that interest our students. They're open to all students, and teachers look for opportunities to encourage their students to participate in them, as we see them as a potential avenue for taking advanced coursework at the high school level. We continue to work to expand these to more subject areas, which now will be including social studies and math. Students at Rams coming into 7th grade will also see a change next year in their math courses, with being able to take either Math 7 or Intermediate Algebra, which is a change from previous years. And that Math 7 course will also include advanced options for differentiation. And our last point is that some students do receive extra support through our supplemental Title I services. And on the next slide, I'll share the example of what Title I supplemental services look at Roseville Area Middle School. So Rams Academy came as a part of the recommendations a few years back to study the middle level schedule and the support model for students at the middle level. The Math Academy and literacy learning classes are part of that MTSS system at Rams. These programs provide students with an additional math or reading course, and they build on the instruction provided in their English language arts and math courses. They serve students in smaller classes and provide individual support for students with a focus on skill building in those areas, but also AVID-like practices in organization, building community, growth mindset, and social emotional learning, or SEL. They're also connecting with families as well, hosting specific family nights with different themes. We've seen an increase in both our math and reading MCA scores since we've expanded these opportunities to our students. Now I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Lake to talk a little bit more about RAMS MTSS.
Thank you, Jake, and good evening, everyone. We thought it would be helpful to provide you with some specific examples of a multi-tiered system of support. The following 2 slides represent the RAMS system. The graph represents 2 tiers of communications from both our STAR RAMS advisory teachers and their content teachers, communicating both with students and families. The Talking Points app is a talk-to-text app that automatically translates into the language of choice. Teachers and admin alike have reported that being very, very beneficial. This slide represents the RAMS Tier 2 intervention communication. I'd like to add that there's an additional level of accountability as teachers and administrators keep comprehensive contact logs in all of our schools. Also, staff working within Tiers 2 and 3 include teachers, paras, counselors, student services, and behavior staff, among many, many others. This slide represents the FOS MTSS work. Again, you'll note the team approach and continual cycle of support for our students. And if you're wondering, a student success navigator is a more progressive title for a traditional behavior interventionist. The next 2 slides provide examples of our secondary mentoring programs. Our tiered support systems and mentoring programs will continue to evolve and improve as we plan for our return to better. The ROS e-mentoring program is fairly self-explanatory, and the FOS Home program is their advisory program, actually is a credit-bearing class within the system of FOS. Here's the RAMS and Parkview programs. These advisory classes are built into the school day. Note the consistent theme of providing social and emotional support to our students. Thank you, and next up is Melissa.
Thanks, Dr. Lake. Many of you have heard the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, right? Meaning an entire community of people must interact with children for those children to grow in a healthy environment. Well, we believe the same is true for developing our educators as learners. It takes a village. Therefore, we have many partnerships in staff development, including partnerships with AVID, Advancement via Individual Determination, CARI, which is the University of Minnesota Center for Applied Research and Educational Improvement, Equity Alliance, the Minnesota Humanities Center, MSU Mankato Institute for Courageous School and District Leadership, the Pyramid Model Innovation, which focuses more on ECSE and pre-K, Hamline University's English Learners in the Mainstream, commonly referred to as ELM, University of Minnesota Tech Instruction for English Language Learners, and the Minneapolis Foundation Reimagine Education grant, which is focusing on staff participation, specifically educational leaders, in upcoming Culturally Responsive School Leadership Institute. We also know that part of being a culturally responsive educator really means committing to being a lifelong learner. So here are some of the ways that we are fostering learning for educators in the Roseville area schools. We are doing some learning around anti-racist schools and classrooms. In this last summer, 2020, there were book studies led by an anti-racism teacher committee leaders. The book that they focused on was How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. We're also doing learning around culturally responsive and competent teaching, which you've heard a little bit about already this evening. Specifically, we're focusing this year around story circles and absent narratives. We've also focused around elementary and secondary staff circles, PD pathways to support teachers and educators in both distance learning and blended learning, online instructional best practices for EL teachers, and professional learning communities that align with our site improvement plans. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Favor.
As you know, one of the priorities of the governor, as well as our strategic priorities, are recruitment and retaining teachers of color. I'm going to share with you the first 3 bullets and ask that Lisa Chang and Dr. Lake continue to share in this area. Our focus group stands for Future-Oriented Communities of United Support. We often get calls from other districts around this concept. It's completely unique to Roseville area schools and the way that it's done, and our teachers of color are being supported. Also, we have a unique partnership with the with Equity Alliance Minnesota. We are asking Equity Alliance to interview teachers of color to get a better understanding of exactly what we need to do to recruit and retain. They will be interviewing teachers of color shortly in two segments, probationary teachers and non-probationary teachers, so that we can better understand how teachers found us and what we can do to retain teachers. Recently, we received a grant from Pellsby. The Pellsby grant that Roseville received was larger than any other district in the state. And that money, the $71,000 roughly, are used to support the work of focus and retaining teachers of colors, everything from mentoring, professional development as focus sees fit, and collaborating with the Minnesota Humanities Center to best support our teachers. Lisa.
Yes. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great, thank you. So collaborating with HR, and Dr. Favor and I talked extensively about this too. We would like and desire to work with Equity Alliance Minnesota on state interviews for probationary staff and current staff. State interviews are just like, instead of exit interviews, we're going to ask them, what do we need to stop? What do we need to continue? And how do we improve? In addition to that, we'll be doing exit interviews. The questions lined up, we just haven't done that, and hoping to get my team as well as Equity Alliance to help us with that as well. Of course, always getting our focus affinity group involved in terms of what kind of questions we should ask our teachers of color. In regards to Minnesota Equity Education Partnership, MNEEP, I'm very excited about this. Rose and I met with Rose's team on what MNEEP is about and how they can help us. So they will help us with our initiatives to recruit and retain our teachers, where we would utilize the MNEEP tools to reach our goals. One of the tools that we're currently that I'm looking at and working with them on is the objectives, measures, targets, and actions form, identifying strategies, objectives, measurements, benchmark info, target, and what type of actions to take. So I'm super happy about that and I'm super eager to get that work started.
Thank you, Lisa.
Move on to Jenny.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. We have applied for and received the MDE Grow Your Own grant for the past 3 years prior to COVID, as this year MDE did not offer the grant. We have received over $140,000 to support additional courses at both ROS and FOS within our education pathways, focused on an attempt to recruit interested students of color into education. That transitions us into college and career readiness. It was hard to select just what to highlight. I'll name a few. Genesis Works is a nonprofit organization we partner with that allows for students to work in a paid internship and earn credit at the same time. Also, Bryn McConnell is the Roz Career Navigator, and she's implemented a college and career readiness curriculum within our English Learner Seminar courses at Roz. Finally, the multilingual SEAL test allows for students to earn college credit upon passing that exam. This opportunity honors our brilliant students where English may not be their first language. This slide briefly highlights the exceptional work of AVID, our 7th through 12 college readiness program. As Melissa said, AVID, Advancement via Individual Determination. In 2019, 97% of the students in the program were students of color. 95% of the students had college plans, and 100% of the students in AVID were meeting college entrance requirements as met through their course selection. Our AVID directors do a wonderful job of partnering with a variety of community businesses and organizations. These partnerships open up extensive opportunities for our students. I'll keep the momentum going here. In terms of eliminating opportunity gaps, we're hitting the mark in the area of scholarships. In just 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, the percentage of students of color scholarship recipients rose from 56.6% to 69.5%. The dollar amount awarded to our students of color increased a dynamic 58.4% to 70.8%. And you can go ahead and review the names of our large scholarships and their respective criteria, all grounded in racial equity. Lastly, this overall presentation is aimed at sharing and showing how we are working to eliminate shameful gaps. Alternative education always leads the way in terms of doing education differently. Both of our high schools have embraced and adopted progressive grading practices, such as eliminating the zero and changing D's and F's to a no mark on student transcripts. This all happened during COVID, and we're currently engaged in discussions centered around how and when we will continue these grading practices when we do return to normal. And we'll transition back to Dr. Faber.
The next component really excites me. It really speaks to servant leadership, and also as we're working together with our community to create what we believe and what we continue to talk about as the Roseville way. Community conversations and student voice. Regina Robinson and I are going to talk a little bit about the community conversations. I'm going to ask her to speak to the board around some of the innovative ideas that she has used in EL, especially with the Facebook Live sessions. Christina.
Thank you, Dr. Faber. So this has been a great passion, and as most things in the pandemic highlighted some of the gaps that needed addressing. One of them was our need to communicate and collaborate effectively with our multilingual families. So working with the multilingual cultural liaisons, we've been able to establish cultural Facebook pages, put Facebook Live sessions out so families could attend and also share the videos later once they've gotten some information. And this was extremely important when we were changing program models, having lots of information coming out quickly. And a lot of our families really benefit from the oral presentations. And so Facebook became a very popular method for doing that. We're also at the buildings doing a lot of town halls, and there's a very exciting feature that allows us to use language channels within a Zoom meeting. So different community languages can be in that same meeting and have simultaneous interpreting. So we would have Karen, Spanish, Somali, all happening at the same time. This really benefits our families and allows them to interact in real time in whatever is happening in that time. I've also done some work with Edgerton staff. Mara Bischoff in particular has really taken some leadership with this, and we are piloting some language lines so that families will be able to call in directly to teachers and staff in buildings using their native language, and also kind of providing some bilingual training to staff so that, or sorry, to families so that they can be more comfortable entering a Zoom call or connecting with teachers in conferences or in the town hall. So there's really been a lot going on. We also started a Latinx parent advisory group that meets monthly, and just kind of get feedback and are looking to grow that group so that we can continue to have insight into what our families are really looking for and what they need. And big shout out to our cultural liaisons who work long hours and are on the phone constantly trying to help families navigate every single thing in a pandemic. Really, the whole team is really invaluable. So I feel very fortunate to work with them.
Thank you, Christina. Building off of that, as you know, we have a number of components that are currently in place around community conversations. One of those components is the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. I want to thank Director Johnson for being a part of that committee. We, within that committee, some of the wonderful work that's come out is just the student dress policy, which we actually sent out a reminder today based on just as students begin to return, just a reminder of the new policy around student dress. Land acknowledgement is a component of what we do. And again, working closely with the American Indian Parent Committee to help us with that. Smudging, putting smudging practices and policies in place, smudging practices in place in various buildings, so that again, we can acknowledge and support our students in the buildings. One of the wonderful things that's happening here in Roseville is the collaboration with Minnesota Humanities Center and Central Park. At Central Park, Rose McGee, who's connected with the Minnesota Humanities Center, has come in and led some family circles where we have taken the time to listen to families in multiple languages. Takes a little time around what they want, what people want for their children as we continue to educate. As you know, we have a tremendous gift in Jamie Johnson and his work around Parent Vibe and the outstanding growth and leadership opportunities he provides for students. Something I'm really excited about. Last week, we were awarded a grant through the Minneapolis Foundation, Reimagining Education Grant, in collaboration again with the Minnesota Humanities Center. That grant is going to allow us to collaborate with the Minnesota Humanities Center to continue our community conversations where we're listening and continuing to exchange and listen and grow capacity in our community around what we believe as a team, the Roseville way. Part of the Roseville way is some of those community-based conversations. Some of the things that are happening in those community-based and school conversations are morning meetings at grade level, some of the town hall meetings that Christina talked about, distance learning feedback and surveys that we're actively seeking to get information from our customer so that parents, we can adjust and adapt and pivot. And I do mean pivot in real time. Monthly town hall meetings we talked about, and in our title programming, parent engagement, it's a component of schools who are receiving title dollars, but also we added that to our school improvement planning as an expectation of the work, how we engage community. I want to backtrack just a bit. One of the things I failed to mention in our community conversations is something that happened today is kind of the roadmap to return advisory committee, where we're listening to parents, that's led by Superintendent Sicoli, where we're listening to parents and answering questions to better support students as they return, and most important, provide people with the most accurate information and data that we have around health and services. Student voice. Again, the component of student voice is part of what we believe is the Roseville way. One of the things we've done that I'm not sure that the board is aware of, through the funds of achievement and integration, we have hired 6 AmeriCorps Promise Fellows. 6 AmeriCorps Promise Fellows who work with 6th grade to 12th grade. Their role is to amplify student voice. We are collaborating with the Minnesota Alliance with Youth for service learning opportunities and projects for our students who can identify these service learning projects based around their interests. And we have these mini grants now coming through a collaboration and a grant with the Minnesota Alliance for Youth, which is exciting, where students can kind of create their own learning and be socially active and engage the community through service, everything from environmental education and activism to social justice, you name it. So we're working closely, and our AmeriCorps volunteers are working closely in the schools to, again, as we continue to return, we're going to amplify student voice and have inter and intra-district activities where we have these clubs and students can lead the clubs and receive funds around whatever project they would like to see. Part of working with Educational Alliance, it's a youth executive board, which is a component of Education Alliance, where we partner with our neighboring districts. And one of the exciting things that have happened through Student Voice, the conversations that we had with students in the secondary schools around our SROs. And because of those conversations, we've actually changed some practices, as you know, with our SROs while maintaining them in the school district, and ongoing conversations so that we can continue to learn and study the effectiveness of SROs within this district. I'd like to ask Dr. Lake to help me with the next 2.
I actually think I'll jump in and finish up the last 2. So in the Department of Teaching and Learning, we have continued to work to expand student voice within our curriculum areas. And we've always worked on having that, but wanted to continue to do that. And that's what these next 2 bullets are. We continue to have student voice on our district curriculum advisory committee with student representatives on the committee. We try to have at least 3 students each year. However, this year I actually had a student volunteer to be my co-chair. So that's a first for me, and it's been a fun experience, and I get a very different perspective and a very good perspective, and it has led to great conversations that we build on, and some other committee work that we've actually started because of it too. So the last point is, in addition to our DCAC student representatives, we're also partnering with our AVID students who serve on the AVID Leadership Council. And we get feedback from them on specific curriculum review areas. We've met with them 2 or 3 times this year. We just started this year, and it has provided some great feedback that leads us even more conversations and other areas that we consider and bring that information back to our curriculum review teams. So I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Lake to continue our student voice presentation slides.
Thanks, Jake. And Michelle, you don't have to go backwards in the presentation, but I do want to touch on a couple of bullets we didn't get to around community conversations. As directed by the superintendent, the principal of each of our schools developed a learning model school team that is met monthly to help inform building leadership of their feedback specific to our blended and distance learning models during the pandemic. Membership has consisted of teachers, nutrition and custodial staff, admin, and most importantly, our parents and families. Also, another initiative, Christina and our English Learner Department partnered with TAD and our Roseville Area Learning Center to provide critical parent and adult training and outreach. And back to student voice. I'd like to highlight a few additional student voice opportunities, and two specifically that need more definition than simply the name include the third bullet, our Distinguished Gentlemen's Group. This is a leadership program for African American young men led by cultural liaison Anthony Anderson at Ross. And also, further down on the list, our Unity programs are after-school enrichment opportunities offered at Rams, Edgerton, Central Park, and Harambee. And I'd like to thank our Community Education Department and their leadership for establishing our Unity programming. And back to Dr. Faber.
As we begin to close out this presentation, just want to remind everyone there's excitement around student voice and how we seek student voice to help guide our practices. Those practices, here are some of the areas using the STAR program and advisory at PCS and RAMS, student surveys at many of our schools, but here are a few that I want to highlight is ROS, FOS, Central Park, and others. Staff office hours and cultural liaison, teacher and office hours, so that we can be intentional about connecting with students, simply focus on need. As you can see, we continue to enhance student voice around focusing on social and emotional learning. That's what SEL is at all of our schools. But we continue to Brim Hall, Central Park, Edgerton, focusing on, again, social and emotional learning as a component of what we do here in Roseville. Some of the exciting things that are happening is book studies for sixth graders. As you can see, book studies and reflective journals that are taking place in sixth grade, how to be an anti-racist, and a stamped Ingram Kendi book at some of our schools, at a few of our schools. Student conversations and clubs. What a wonderful way and opportunity to allow students to lead and guide and direct our work. I hope that our AmeriCorps Vistas and others are involved in this process so that we can continue to amplify. The Good Human Club at EDW, writing as a component of student voice at Central Park. And again, Jamie Johnson and his exceptional work with LIT, Leaders in Training. Board members, we want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to share much of the outstanding work that's happening here in Roseville and provide you an opportunity to ask questions that you may have. Thank you again. And on behalf of the team, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Faber and everyone. Wow. Sometimes you get what you ask for. You know, I know you guys have responded tonight to some of the questions that we on the board have had over the last several months around impact, what's happening, how are things going. You certainly answered. So I guess I'll just take a breath myself and ask my colleagues if there are any questions, thoughts, comments on any of this. And if there are some questions, maybe where you want to start and how to dig in. Curtis got the first hand up.
Okay. I'm just going to echo, wow, that's a lot of stuff. So in no particular order, I think, Jake, this one's for you. Going back to the MCA reading slide, one thing that was I didn't quite understand was that in some of the graphs you had for some of the schools stats for Black students and multiracial students, but some that didn't have some. You had one that just had multiracial students, but no, the multiracial students and white students only. I think that was for Little Canada, and then for another set, multiracial just dropped off altogether. So, is there? yeah, I guess. Is there a reason for that, or can we in the future have that carry through all of the stats?
Yeah, we actually do carry those through. This was actually a part of our some data that I had pulled for our achievement gap closure report that we did last fall, not this fall, but last fall. And these were actual just data that we had picked to show some of the areas where we're closing achievement gaps. So if they're not on there, that group may not have been closing, that might not have gap closing, but these were just examples of that throughout our district to provide that. So you might have seen different groups of students that are represented on each of those different slides.
Okay.
But when we do like our MCA report and our or our achievement report and our growth reports, we definitely put all of our student groups within those slides. You can see all those, how those are represented.
Cool. All right. That makes sense. Thank you. Okay. Next question on the graduation slide. And I understand that this was it was the 2018, 2019. And under American Indians, we had information for the state, but it didn't look like we had anything for Roseville area high school. I know we graduated some.
We did, and yeah, good question. I probably should have pointed that out. Oversight by me, so I apologize for that. But it's really just because we had fewer than the number of students that we can report publicly, so that's why that one doesn't show up.
Okay.
But yes, we did have students graduate, and actually, I think in that year we had like 100% graduation. So
right, that's what I was looking for. Like, hey, wait, that was the thing.
Of course, the reasoning from the state behind that is when you have a relatively small number of students and you're sharing educational data, that then the data privacy might not be protected. You might be able to figure out who students are. That sort of thing.
Sure, no, I get that, I want to thank you for working with data on a daily basis. I know that's not an easy thing, and you do a really great job. So thank you for that. Okay, next question goes to Christina. A lot of what you said did not catch me off guard, but one thing did, in a good way. And this was the town halls. So let me get this straight. You're doing town halls where you're having translations done with multiple languages. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. So there's kind of like when you see videos of the United Nations, those are simultaneous interpreters so that they are able to say things just as they are coming through. That is what we were able to do in our Zoom town halls. So at Edgerton Elementary in particular, like the last town hall they did, there were like 18 multilingual families in that meeting, and I think 3 languages represented. And so it's, while there's a lot of things about the pandemic that aren't so great, this is one thing where I'm like, this is a real win because our families are right in the action, understanding things as they happen, and they can ask their own questions as things are happening in front of them. So it's very exciting. Yeah. And very kudos to all of our buildings who actually really dove into that in a big way and figured out a lot of the bugs themselves and just really did it. So I'm very, very proud of that work that they've done. Yeah.
Yeah, I am a computer person. I'm beyond impressed. I've attended a ton of Zoom meetings, as everyone here has. I've just never seen that done. So that's great.
We'll make sure to invite you the next time. I mean, it doesn't look any different for you, but for the people who are listening on a language line, it kind of mutes the English and then they can hear their own thing. So it's cool.
That's cool. That's cool. Very cool. All right. Hang on. I'll get there. All right. No, actually, I don't have any other questions. Okay, so I'll just end this by saying this. You guys, wow, you guys do a tremendous amount of work. And I know when we started this coming into this year, there was this idea of, okay, we don't want to return to normal, we want to return to better. And you see all of these efforts that are being put into place. And I just don't see how we don't return to better. And I know there's more stuff coming that's in the hopper. But my kudos to all of you and your staff and the teachers and the paraprofessionals and everybody that makes this magic happen. You have my undying gratitude. Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis. Other thoughts or questions, specific or general? Kitty.
I just can't say enough following Curtis and Mike in terms of how exciting it is to see how we're applying the equity lens so broadly across so many different dimensions of what we do. I mean, the equity vision, you can just hear it living and breathing in all the different work that's being done, and that's very exciting. I did have a couple of specific questions. With our school improvement plans, it sounds like every school has an improvement plan, if I understood correctly. But do the regional centers actually support all the schools, or that's just available for our Title I schools?
Dr. Fever, you want to take that?
Sure. Along with you, of course. The school improvement planning process, although we've done it in the past, we went a little deeper this year with our school improvement planning, a little more intentionality and focused around how we're looking at data and making sure that we can pivot during the year. The Regional Centers of Excellence works closely with the title schools and the leadership in the title schools, but they are a consult across the district to anyone who may look at their plan, look at their data, and see they need some additional action and support.
Wow.
Anything you'd like
excellent.
to add? Lawrence, anything?
No, just that when we looked at our practices I wanted to improve, we had a training for all our administrative staff. So at that point, all the principals did participate. And as Dr. Favor said, they really focus on Title I schools. However, they are also available to other schools if they want.
And one more thing, Director Daggins, if I can add, the resources that come along with the Regional Centers of Excellence, everything from the templates to the guiding questions to work that's been done across the state so we don't have to duplicate, it's pretty powerful. It's pretty powerful work.
I had an opportunity to sit in on the Harambe School Improvement Plan when it was being shared in one of the town hall meetings. And it was impressive about the breadth and thought that had gone into it. It was very exciting to hear.
Yeah,
next question. I'm sorry.
I was just going to add that as part of Title I schools, they have an annual meeting where they're obligated to share their plan with stakeholders and solicit feedback and gather input. And so I think that is part of the process that you attended.
Yes, it was kind of integrated into the town hall meeting series, which was fun to hear. My next question is, as you were talking about all these different activities, a lot of these sound like things we've been working on for a number of years, but some of them sounded like maybe we've made some progress despite or because of the distance learning. Certainly some of the work Christina was sharing and was talked about with the Facebook meetings, et cetera, was one element. It sounds like the school improvement plans, we've been able to take a step forward even with the distance learning, that we've been able to get more regional center support. Are there any other areas that we feel like we've been able to make significant progress despite the incredible distractions and focus that's need to been put on providing education in the current environment?
I would add a couple, Kitty. One would be the work around MTSS and our models for intervention. I think during this time in the pandemic, we just have not taken no for an answer, and we just continue to pursue interventions to the end of time. And we've just so much more depth to that work and that continual cycle. And then I see the other piece being just the ability, as we've all discussed already, those virtual connections and how we've grown community and parent feedback, whether it be the learning model teams, the RTR work, the town halls that are online. Some schools have experienced growth within those, even PTA meetings, up to 10 times the normal participations.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to piggyback on that too, Dr. Lake, and say that some of our connections with our student voice has also grown, like we shared about with teaching and learning, being able to have and participate in that AVID Leadership Council, and all those students being able to be there at the same time wasn't a possibility that we would have thought about. But being able to do some of those things virtually makes it a lot easier.
I was going to add that one area that we have done some improvement is alignment with our goals. So we have very different programs that require us to have goals. We have school improvement goals. We have the teacher development and evaluation goals. We have HPPS goals. We have ADSIS. So what we've tried to do is to make sure that once we go through the school improvement process, we do a needs assessment where we actually really look at data to make sure that that our goals are the same goals, so that all our energy could go in there. We can see marked improvement.
And one last thing, Board Chair Boguszewski mentioned this in event at MSBA, that we are starting to see some success, academic success with some of our students, even through the pandemic. And he asked a great question around, how are we looking at that academic success that we're seeing, where we're seeing some growth in learning? How are we looking at that as we begin to return students to school?
As I see some of the information that comes out in other school districts and newspapers and journals, et cetera, it feels like a lot of districts are having a larger disconnect with some students. And I was just, as I was hearing about all this work on MTSS and heard about in the last many months, it just feels like that has really, really been something that has helped our district stay connected with more of our student body in these difficult times. And I wanted to really thank everybody for that, because I think that's made a huge difference. When, for example, in the grade report that we had from the secondary school, and how different that looked than some of what you read in the paper and journals. So thank you for all this work. I think it's just amazing and exciting.
I just have one additional question that came up during, and then I reminded it when you were talking, Flo, on the goals, teacher goals, individual goals, and team goals. Are our staff okay? Do they feel okay about progress they're being able to make towards their goals during the pandemic? I know we've done so many things to help guard our students against kind of, unfair, things that are happening because of remote learning, et cetera, with grade structures and all of that. I just wondered if the teachers feel like there's been a setback, like across the boards, to their own individual development and goals and team goals, or if they're okay with where things are, or just maybe talk about that a little bit. Whoever.
I'm going to attempt to respond to that. One thing that we did do with our goal setting, especially at the teacher level, is to make sure that we were flexible given the guidelines from MDE. So we're flexible as much as we can, and also to be realistic. But that said, this is very difficult. So I don't expect them to say that it was very easy, but I hope they'll respond to you that we're being as flexible as we can within the scope of the program, and making sure that we're trying to take away the barriers that may impede them from doing that work.
Thank you. Todd.
Hey, thanks, Chair Bogoszewski. Again, everybody, this is fantastic work. This was a great presentation to see all the work and the staff putting into all this. And I especially want to draw attention to how intentional this district is and staff is around student voice. I think that's one of the better lists I've seen, one of the more exhaustive lists I've seen about how intentional we are being around student voice. I can personally attest to the students that are on the District Curriculum Advisory Committee and their energy and their passion, and especially the questions that the co-chair asks and some of the discussions. Jake knows what I mean, some of the discussions and the energy around the discussions that we've had. It's just wonderful to see them. Jake, this is more of a question for you. I just had kind of a real curious question. We have students on the DCAC, and I remember that I was like a part of a curriculum review team a while back. I think it might have been for K through 6 social studies or something, or language arts, before I was even on the board. Have we, do we have actual students on some of the actual review teams? Have we? I'm just wondering, under teaching and learning, what that history has been like.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. That's one of the things that we have always struggled with, because typically, as you served on that social studies review, it's typically during the school day, and we don't want to pull our students out of their classes and their learning time. And so that's been the kind of that beautiful work that we've been able to do with our AVID program. And so we are bringing all of that information to them and being able to get that feedback from them in a different way now. And we go to their meeting and we bring them, here's what our curriculum team is thinking about, and what kind of feedback do you have about these specific areas that we're looking for feedback on. So they don't necessarily serve on the team, but we're getting their feedback into the process in a different way. And Zoom has been a really big help as a part of that. And Melissa can probably speak a little bit more to that too, as she helped make some of those connections.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that. I think what's really, I mean, I appreciate what you said, Ted, because there's part of those meetings that wouldn't necessarily be relevant, and it is probably more time than we want them to be away from school. That said, we certainly want their perspective. And so what we've done is looked at the different phases of program review. And then each phase we engage the students in that curricular area. So for example, phase 1 is like, what are we doing basically in this area and how well is it working? And so this year it's asking them that about health or social and emotional learning or their experiences in FIED, right? What has your experience been? What was positive that we should keep doing? And what are we not doing that we should be doing? So it's getting their voice around the things that probably are most important, right, to what their experiences and how they can help shift our practices in developing curriculum and moving forward. But it's also done in a way where they don't miss learning or access to their own classes as well. So far it's worked pretty well. We've met with them a few times and gone over, we've gotten their feedback around social and emotional learning and FIED and health. And then next up, I believe, is K-12 art. So we're just kind of cycling through based on where we are at in the program review cycle.
Thank you.
Any other, Dr. Scully?
Well, I would just like to thank my colleagues district-wide. You can imagine all these efforts require such commitment from so many people. So I'm just very proud to be associated with such dedicated educators who are passionate about equity and who are committed to the success and well-being of each and every student.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Yeah,
And thank your people and your teams, because I know it wasn't just you either, it was all the folks that you work with to help you get this team together. So, Rose?
Yeah, I echo what everybody says. It's amazing. I think I'm the one being the newbie, wanted to know so much about the district. Well, I got it. So it's wonderful. Is this slide deck available? That would be great. I'm not seeing in the packet, so it would be great to share that. And then I did have a question. around the parent advisory. I saw, and maybe I'm just missing, there was African American parent advisory, and then there's one for American Indian parent advisory. There was a Latino one. Is there one with either Asian American or some of the Asian American parent groups at all? Just wondering.
So I'm wondering, maybe Dr. Faber, if you might want to respond, because I think that is one bullet point that maybe we didn't touch on, was it wasn't an American or an African American parent advisory. It was the AALC. You want to share about that?
Right. There's not really an African American parent advisory. It's a component of what happens at schools. The AALC is a partnership that I'm a part of to represent Roseville and St. Paul with the minister and African American leadership, because we have over 1,000 kids roughly coming from St. Paul. So that component is there.
Okay. So in that way, then I'm just wondering about are we engaging other parents beside those with the specific groups that were formed?
Right. I'll just say briefly that when we started the Latinx Parent Advisory this year, we also talked about working with some other groups like the Karen or, the Bhutanese, and recognizing all that's going on. We're like, okay, why don't we start where we kind of have a group already and kind of figure out how to do this in a pandemic and with another language. But it's definitely something, we're interested in and we'll plan to scale up. And I would say also that, just our cultural liaisons are really our most important touch point for a lot of our communities. Even when I talk about these things for some of our communities, they're like, why would I come to another meeting? And, what am I going to say? Like, I want my kid to learn and it's all good or whatever, so there's a lot of, nuances to setting up these kind of advisories. And right now in a pandemic, maybe not going to be the best, but definitely something we continue, set up our own little United Nations here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I also think,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, Dr. Faber mentioned how excited he is and we are about obtaining the Minneapolis Foundation grant in partnership with the Minnesota Humanities Center. So we really feel that can be a vehicle moving forward to get greater engagement with various parts of our community. And we were wrestling for this presentation, like which section does that grant go under? Does it go under community conversations or does it go under student voice? Because really it's around heavy on both those areas. So we're looking forward to what that might bring in the future.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. So my final question is, I've been thinking about how, given we need our community support going forward with our referendum expiring, or a referendum that we need to work on. How do we communicate some of this amazing work? So that's just a question. We don't need to answer it today, but I thought a lot about kind of like, all that was presented today. Not that we need to give that out, all of it, but just thinking about how do we think about communicate that to the larger community, the work that is being done, and how we engage community, how we engage student voice, how we support teachers of color. So just a question that's on my mind. Mm-hmm.
Could I ask a follow-up question to the Minneapolis Foundation grant? Will that new funding allow us to continue Central Park, or does it in fact allow us to take it to other schools?
I think it will allow us to take it to other schools.
Wonderful. That is an exciting program.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments? All right. Well, thank everybody again. Take care. Yep. We'll move on. Next is the action items for tonight. And the first is a resolution authoring the sale of certificates of participation for a facility. And I believe Sherry Thompson is also going to lead us through this agenda item.
Yes, thank you. I was excited about this agenda item. And then I heard the thought, now how do you follow up on that? But being a bean counter, I am excited about to bring this forward to you. I look at this as a puzzle. We've been working on this puzzle since 2016 on our facilities, starting with facility planning, the board taking action on a long-term facility maintenance program and plan that you continue to act on annually. And then the very fortunate passage of our building bond referendum by our community in November of 2017. And this is the final piece. This is securing the final funding piece for the Fairview Education Center for replacement of that facility. I've said this before, and as all of you know, after we did pass the bond referendum, we came to find out that after further study that the Fairview Education Center structurally was not sound. So we worked with Ellers and looked at alternatives. And that alternative was shifting a few of the bond dollars around. So we've got $16.5 million in voter approved bonds. And then we're looking to complete that gap on the project with $20.5 million in a 15-year lease levy purchase. So we're asking this evening, Jody Zespa and the Ellers crew were at your previous meeting. Tonight, we're asking for a resolution that, number one, authorizes the sale of the certificates. The sale will take place on February 9th, and then also establishes a pricing committee. And this is, I know that you've taken a similar action in the past, and I don't recall if that was LTFM bonds. The sale will occur, as I said, on February 9th. This just basically allows for like the board chair and myself to accept a proposal that afternoon, because we do need to be available to sign off on those documents prior to you taking final action at your meeting that evening. And then also as part of that, we set a ceiling, a cap as far as interest rate goes. The interest rate that is included in this resolution is 3.4%. And again, that's the ceiling. I think the estimate on the pre-sale certificate was about 2.5% or 2.66%. But even at the 3.4, it's still a decent true interest rate. And again, it falls within the amount that we had budgeted and that we've set aside as far as levy going forward. And what was already placed, bookmarked in your levy for the taxes that are payable in 2021 calendar year. So that's all I have.
So Sherry, this is something we need to formally approve. Is that true? Yes.
Yes, there is a resolution.
So, yeah, it's like a 3-page resolution. So I think we can just refer to the resolution, I believe, in the motion. Typically resolutions, Curtis, we do have had the clerk read them in as a motion generally. So maybe you could go ahead and move the resolution like it's written on the bottom of that page, and we'll get it seconded. And then if we have any questions, we can, or any discussion, we can have it. Well, I guess first I'll ask you before we move it, any questions for Sherry? It seems pretty straightforward to me, but any other questions from my colleagues? Okay. Curtis, could you?
Sorry. Sorry, I just had it. Okay, resolution authorizing sale of certificates of participation. Yes?
Yep. Yep.
All right. So I don't have a 3-page.
Oh, so at the bottom of the first page,
Oh, there. Okay.
it just says, so you just say, I would move that the board
Okay.
adopts.
All right. I would move that the board adopt this resolution authorizing the sale of certificates of participation series 2121A for purposes of facility lease levy.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Clerk Johnson, could you take the vote? We're getting a lot of action tonight.
Oh, yeah. Director Chu.
Aye.
Director Shaw.
Aye.
Treasurer Goggins.
Aye.
Director Anderson.
Aye.
Chair Boguszewski.
Aye.
And Clerk Johnson votes aye.
Thank you. Approved. Let's go make money.
Thanks, Sherry.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Well, Sherry's still in the hot seat now because our next action item is the 21-22 budget parameters and timeline that Sherry is going to review with us for our approval tonight. Sherry.
Yes. Thank you. And this is similar action to what you've taken in years past. We are starting, are well on our way as far as the budget for next year. There's a couple of things that I want to point out. Obviously, we talked about current year budget revisions earlier this evening. Yes, we know we're in unprecedented times. We are bringing these parameters forward to you. I will go through some of those or point out a few things, but also keep in mind, if we need to adjust these throughout the budget cycle, we will bring them back to you for action also. And, typically you take action on these in January and we just move forward. And sometimes we revise them in June because we know if the legislature has finished their business, but I guess we're just kind of putting on you a notice that if things do change other than what you've approved tonight, we will come back to you. As far as our parameters go, yes, we know we are in the middle of a pandemic. We know that the money is tight at the state level. We also know that recent economic forecasts have been better than anticipated. We have I think the next forecast comes on February 26th, I think is the next forecast. Also, I know, the governor has just released his budget. We feel as though we are bringing forward a conservative budget in building in a 1% increase in the basic funding formula for next year. So I wanted to point that out. Also, then I'm going to move down to enrollment parameters. Looking at our enrollment, typically we use enrollment, the enrollment that we have on February 1st of this year, we would roll forward and then add kindergarten in. We make a couple of tweaks, but we pretty much use that to determine our enrollment for the upcoming school year. As I mentioned earlier, we did lose about 200 elementary students, or primarily at elementary, with the pandemic. So we are looking at each grade level of each school and really doing a deep dive. We are not making the assumption that 100% of those students that left us will be returning to us next year. We know they are in a variety of programs, including homeschool, non-public schools, charter schools, online programs. So we are taking the initiative, though, to work with families. Our principals are doing that. We've had a lot of discussion about this. So we're taking a very close look and we'll continue to take a close look at enrollment. But for right now, I would say just on a rough number, is we're anticipating that about 60% will return. And again, we will continue to adjust this. We monitor enrollment in any given year. We monitor enrollment closely throughout the school year and then also throughout the summer months. And the other thing I guess that I would want to point out that's maybe different than other years, and we touched on this a little bit earlier as well, the federal CARES funds. We will be using those to partially offset operating deficits for next year as is allowed, and also to provide additional remedial and enrichment programming outside of the regular school day or school year. So unless there are questions, I don't have any more on that. Again, I just wanted to point out some of those things that haven't been in a typical year.
Any questions for Sherry? If not, then again, I entertain a motion to approve the budget parameters and timeline as outlined.
I would like to move the budget parameters and timeline as presented.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further board discussion? Seeing none. Curtis, could you take the vote again, please? Thank you.
Director Anderson.
Aye.
Treasurer Goggins.
Aye.
Chair Boguszewski.
Aye.
Director Chu.
Aye.
Director Shaw.
Aye.
Clerk Johnson votes aye.
Thank you. That passes.
Thank
Next
you.
up, did I interrupt you, Sherry? Go ahead. Oh,
I
okay.
just said thank you.
You're welcome. Next
Can I
up,
say
action
something?
item- Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say, being a newbie on this, I thank you for the clarity on those parameters. It's really, yeah, just kind of my way to learn about this is really great. So thank you.
Great. You're welcome. Thank you.
So with that, we'll move on to the next action item, which is approval of the final 21-22 and 22-23 draft calendars. And I believe Dr. Lake is leading us through this again.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I brought the first reading forward on January 12th, and at that time there was no feedback and no proposed changes. So I'm bringing it back again for final approval. Again, final for 21-22 and draft for 22-23.
Any questions? I don't think so. So again, entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Katie. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Todd. Any discussion? Hearing none. Curtis.
Chair Boguszewski.
Aye.
Director Shaw.
Aye.
Director Chu.
Aye.
Director Anderson.
Aye.
Treasurer Goggins.
Aye.
And Clerk Johnson votes aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
With that, I think we finished the action items for tonight. And so next up is the report on the last study session we had. I know we had, I think, dual shadowing note takers with Clerk Johnson and Director Chu. So I don't know which one of you wants to kind of go with it.
Yeah, Curtis, which he and I communicated, and he's going to do it tonight.
Okay, excellent. So, thank you. So we had a very good discussion with Peter Leatherman and Barb Mickle regarding our expiring district taxpayer funded operating levy, and we will need to seek approval from voters in November for renewal. So Expect to hear more about that in coming months. We all have a role to play in ensuring the accurate information is available to our community, and so that we can make an informed decision. We also had some committee assignment changes. The one that I wrote down was Director Chu is our new representative for the Ramsey County League of Local Governments. And she will do a great job with that. She takes over for me, and I appreciate it. It's a good group. Regrettably, I can't do that anymore because I am double booked at that time. So you will enjoy that, I promise you. And lastly, we had a discussion about we had a discussion about a proposed bill that's making its way through the Minnesota Senate, essentially designed to, quote, give local authority to school districts regarding opening and closing of schools, essentially a bill that would allow school districts to ignore the governor's emergency declaration. So we talked about that, and yeah, so and that was it.
Thank you, Curtis. Also, fellow board members, I have a late agenda adjustment. For whatever reason, the human resources information for this meeting was not in my paper packet that I have here. And because I'm using the laptop, I wasn't on screen, so I did not see the retirements and termination information we usually have. So what I'd like us to do is go back, and I can just handle that now because we typically do it, separately from the consent agenda anyway. So with no further ado, we do have a couple of retirements to announce. One is Gary Thole, retiring as custodian engineer from Central Park Elementary. He's worked for the district for 7 years. And he'll be retiring effective at the end of a couple months from now. So, Gary, thank you very much for your service. And again, I think just at whatever the role, whatever the level, again, exhibits dedication to the kids and the students and families and community of our district. And we appreciate that. I guess I'd entertain a motion to accept with gratitude the retirement of Gary Thole.
So moved.
We'll give it to Kitty. Second, Curtis. There you go. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Curtis, could you take the roll?
Treasurer Goggins?
Aye.
Director Anderson?
Aye.
Director Chu?
Sorry. Aye.
Director Shaw?
Aye.
Chair Boguszewski?
Aye. And then there's a second retirement that we don't need to vote approval on at this point. It was part of the consent, but as many of us know and have heard, we have received the retirement announcement from our beloved superintendent, Dr. Aldo Ciccoli. And I think he's going to mention that and talk about it a bit in his superintendent's report that is upcoming after our board reports this evening. But again, just wanted to share that with everyone. And thank Dr. Ciccoli for the first time. I think that we'll thank him about this for many times to come for his years of service, 6 years with the district, and probably 6 of the most tumultuous and unpredictably horrible years in the entire history of American education that anyone could ever have imagined. And having steered us through it to this point with our gratitude, and more to come. His retirement will be effective at the end of June this year. So we still have him with us at the helm through that time period. But thank you, Dr. Ciccoli. And like I said, we'll hear more at least briefly from him in a little bit. So thank you. With that, we'll move into the board reports. Anyone want to begin? Nobody have anything? Kitty?
Kitty does.
I do too, but I wait.
Yeah, yeah. All right, wait.
I don't always want to be first.
Kitty, I'm
hog this
guessing that
first
you were
spot.
always first in every class you've ever been in your life, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Okay.
We had the quarterly meeting of the Finance Committee last week in preparation for some of what you've received today. As always, they provide some very insightful comments and thoughts. I think one of the main areas of conversation we had was around the number of students and the assumption around how many are going to be coming back that we lost. And the group was very much thinking about, how do we reduce the risk to the budget? How conservatively do we need to budget to ensure that we don't go through quite as large a reduction in our fund balance as we did this last year? How can we build in flexibility so that if we have to, if we get a 2% cut and reduced in number of students, that we can cut the expenses somewhat. And so there was discussion around that, but also around how do we budget more conservatively? How do we get a more precision around our estimate on how many students will return? Thinking about ways to mitigate some of it if it occurs, such as, filling, how quickly we fill slots for retirees. Do we wait until we have to? Some of those kinds of questions, but trying to help us think through how do we manage some of those financial risks. The other key message we got is when we talked about the referendum is to keep it simple. Yes, we have to answer misunderstandings and barriers, but the simpler we can keep the message, the more effective it will be, particularly in the current environment where there's an awful lot of competing messages and competing concerns. So that was two of the key messages we got from that group. Wanted to let the group know that I am part of the MSBA LEAF group. Folks could have applied, and there were 16 of us who were selected from across the state, and we'll be working together to think critically and creatively about the future and to apply a future-oriented lens to policy development and analysis. That's a quote from their program. There's a lot of effort within it to try to help us think through how to engage a network of thought partners in our community across different stakeholders, and to really examine our assumptions about the future and better understand how the changes that are happening today could affect our community years from now. I will report back as there are things that I think would be beneficial for others to understand. And the third thing, which I know 3 of us have been at, is the Minnesota School Board Association Conference. It's spread across 3 different Thursday mornings, and this Thursday is our last one. And there will be a presentation from the Roseville School District at this Thursday's meeting, which is really a little bit about what we got to hear some about, which is the curriculum and instructional compass from an equity lens. And the presentation is about how does that really get translated to on the ground, what's being done. And we had 2 principals and 3 teachers representing different ages across our school district in the presentation. And I know I forwarded it to board members since we did have to pre-record it, not the question and answer session, but the presentation itself, because it's occurring during school time. and some staff was unable to make that time. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Kitty. Todd, you kind of signaled you were next. There you go.
Thanks, Chair Boguszewski. Just wanted to mention that last week I had an opportunity, along with Chair Boguszewski and Director Chu, the quarterly local government officials meeting, and I just want to thank Superintendent Sicoli and staff, Michelle, for continuing these meetings with our local elected officials, our stakeholders. It's an opportunity to hear. We heard from Senator Marty about what's happening in the state legislature. We heard from a couple Ramsey County commissioners, cities of Roseville, Maplewood, Little Canada. Peter Lindstrom from the Met Council was there. But a great way to exchange ideas, what's happening, and a great way for us as a school district to share, again, with these community partners what's happening. We had a great discussion around Fairview and what was going on there, and answered a lot of good questions. But just, I thank again Superintendent Sicoli for continuing to make those a focus. They're really helpful, and everyone loves attending them. They keep saying, I know everyone keeps saying that they love this exchange of ideas and reports of what's happening at the various levels. So thank you.
Anyone else next? Curtis.
Okay. Kitty already talked about the MSBA Leadership Conference, and it's been great. Actually, it's a little weird having it spread out over 3 weeks, but it kind of works. Just as an aside, the cohort, the MSBA cohort that Kitty has joined is kind of a big deal, and she really underplayed it. Yes, there were 16 people that were chosen, but it's 16 people across the state, and a lot of people did apply for it. So great job, Kitty. I was able to attend the Little Canada PTA meeting, which I don't always get to do because I usually work late, but I was able to sneak out this time, and it was a great meeting. Obviously, Little Canada has the DLI, so there was translation going on. The meeting basically centered around preparing, what the plans were for return to school. So today, the kindergartners and first graders got to return to school, and everyone's very excited. And it was a great session because parents were able to express, even their concerns that they had. I got to answer some questions regarding what we're about the RTR group and some of the changes that are coming forward. So, including the 4 day a week and then eventually 5 days a week return to schools. Finally, a small report on the Minnesota Social Studies Standards Group. We did request an extension for the review process. That has been granted. We've also been granted a delay in the release of the second draft. So regrettably, I have no more information regarding when that second draft will be coming out, but as soon as I do, I'll tell you. And again, I will just say, if the first draft is out, it was incomplete, but you need to, please feel free to contact the group if you have any questions, concerns, comments, things you want adds, things you want to subtract. Now is a good time. So, and that's it.
Thank you. Frank or Rose?
Hi, I'll just add that Curtis and I were part of the annual meeting of the Minnesota School Board Directors of Color meeting within the MSBA conference, leadership conference. So it was a great chance to kind of meet new board members who just got elected or re-elected. And then there were a couple of awards that we give out. And I'm trying to remember who got it. I know one of them was Abdi, and I can't remember the other one right now. Yeah. So one of them was a founder of this group. And so we really honor him for him pioneering this group and that he will stay connected as an alumni school board member of the formerly from Mankato. And I cannot remember the other one. Oh, it was a superintendent from St. Louis Park.
St. Louis Park.
That's it.
Yeah, Austin. That's
yes.
right.
Yeah. So, and then the last
Aston.
thing, yeah, the last thing is I'm trying to who was there. Mike, right? Me and Frank. We were the 3 board members attended the teacher leadership project program. Yeah, so they were asking lots of great questions about the role of being a school board member. I think what was interesting, I don't know whether Mike, you got this email after the meeting. They had a little debrief, and they basically say, major takeaway, our school board is really about equity, and our school board really support teachers. So it's great that they got that from the 3 of us, that we are passionate about the equity work and also about our teachers. Yeah. That's all I got.
Thanks. Frank, anything from you tonight?
I'm fine.
Great. I just have a few things. I did attend the recent virtual Gifted and Talented Advisory Council meeting, and Trina here continues to kind of lead that vigorously, and it's pretty well attended. At the most recent one, she actually shared with us a tool, it's called a mood meter. And it's just basically a grid with different colors, but it's a tool that was developed by Yale University to help people, kids, adults, anybody, kind of figure out where you are, recognize and regulate your emotional state, et cetera. So she said they've started using that in some of their meetings and some of their classes and things, so it's kind of neat. Mike Schrader was there to share that we are expecting the Summer Academy to happen again this summer. So registration, I think, for that opens up in February. That, again, for those who don't know, is a series or a set of classes and workshops and things that kids can participate in, kind of in the GATE spectrum. They're doing a lot of work around identifying GATE students in the coming year, both informally and formally. I think there's a tool change this year. There's a new cognitive ability test that's going to be put into place. So I think the intent is to, again, be more equitable and across the board about identifying kids who are kind of in that GATE spectrum. There's also a lot of enrichment clubs that are starting up that are being done virtually. Again, for kids who are interested, I think registration for that started this week. It's things like a foodie club, 3D printing club. These are like 4th, 5th graders, 6th graders, that kind of thing, 3rd graders. There's a 4th grade club on the stock market and investing. If I had started that when I was in 4th grade, maybe I'd be able to retire today, but myself, but I didn't. Anyway, just a lot of good work going on. I think we're going to hear more from them, if I'm not mistaken, at our next study session, at our next meeting. Trina's coming to report on the work that they're doing. Let's see. Secondly, I also attended some of the MSBA annual conference workshops. One in particular was co-hosted and co-led by Dr. Favor, our assistant superintendent, and Sebastian Witherspoon, who's the executive director of Equity Alliance Minnesota, on how what they called it, how to lean into racial equity work with grace. And it was really well done, well put together, had a lot of involvement, had some breakout rooms. It was focused a lot on just raising awareness of the current status of equity across the schools in Minnesota, which is not as good as anyone wants it to be or it needs to be. And then even, little ways to increase our self-awareness and encourage ourselves to step in and act or say something or intervene if we see something going on, or if we see something that is racist or in some way inequitable happening, and how do we model that to others. And then it was a presentation to school board members, obviously, and so really encouraging school board members across the state to be careful and thoughtful about how they prioritize their resources, their budgets, all of that, how they remove barriers, how everything needs to start with policies that support the right kind of work and the right kind of effort. So it was really well done. So kudos to Mike and Sebastian from Equity Alliance. And then lastly, speaking of Equity Alliance, had the most recent Equity Alliance Minnesota board meeting, had the audit report. Frankly, again, I think the finances there are perilous. I've talked about that before. There was a little glimmer of positivity this time around. There have been a couple of contracts that have been signed for audit work and other work from some non-member school districts. So that was a little encouraging. So the eating into the fund balance that it's been living on for the last couple of years had slowed, at least momentarily. But there's still going to be a lot of redoubled effort around, grants, really kind of marketing their services, et cetera, to stay afloat and be able to continue to do what they do. They did have an exciting inquiry from the University of Wisconsin at Madison to potentially do some equity auditing and other work there at the university level. And I think the question was, do they have the resources on board to do it? So I think Sebastian was going to try to, if he needed to, bring in some folks. But it was at the time of the board meeting last week, it was unclear if they'd be able to respond to that. But the good part of that is word is getting out. When people are looking for help in understanding their equity situation and what to do about it, Equity Alliance Minnesota is rising to the top, is being discovered in Google searches or whatever the right term is. So that's a good thing too. That's my report for tonight. With that, I think we're at superintendent's report. Dr. Sicoli, take it away.
Chair Wojciechowski. So continue to be pleased with the facilities projects, and want to thank the community for passing the bond referendum in 2017. We are on budget and on our time frame for all the projects, and really the remaining projects left, of course, are the some of the phase 3 work at Roseville Area High School and the construction of the new facility at the Fairview site. Now, we also need to have the resources to return to back to better after the pandemic. And as was mentioned earlier in this meeting, we have a voter approved operating levy that, if the board and community did nothing, would expire. So there are plans to go out in November of 2021. And I just want to remind people, because some people aren't aware that, the bond referendum of 2017, that money can only be used for those facility projects. It can't be used for operation of the schools. And that's where an operating levy comes into play. And we know that to have more stable funding, that our students need more revenue than they have now for our schools. And we think we've been good stewards in making the necessary budget reductions in recent years. And we also know that this pandemic has been hard on everyone, and it has increased the financial challenges within our community. So we do look forward to continuing to work with our community to find out how we meet these challenges and get back to better on the other side of this pandemic. And speaking of the pandemic, there is hope, is that the end may not be too far off, as we have some vaccinations being administered, and they have found their way to starting to find their way to school staff. So on this, the state has this pilot program, and last week had 9 pilot sites, 2 in the metro and 7 in greater Minnesota. And our district was allocated 18 slots, 18 vaccinations for staff. And as far as we know, we had 18 people get vaccinated, because if they hadn't, they would have told us, according to the description they had, well, you have X number of slots, go to your next people. Now this week it's a little different. So they've separated the age 65 and over in terms of location from the educators. And so they're going to have this event from Thursday through Monday at the Excel Energy Center. And we were told our district, the good news is 384 slots. So that is a definite increase from 15 slots last week. I think one thing that appears to be different though is it seems like they have allocated, their allocations are more than the number of doses they have. So we likely will not get 384 people vaccinated, but we're certainly going to get much more than 18. So we look forward to, there is hope that those numbers will continue to increase, the vaccination numbers, and that is just a good thing for everyone. So we look forward to that. This Saturday is a special day. I think we had reference to the 3 morning sessions virtually this year of the MSBA conference, leadership conference. Well, in the past, they would have the award ceremony during the 1.5-day conference, and it will be done this Saturday, January 30th. I believe it's at noon. But we have a number of our board members being recognized this Saturday. So Curtis Johnson will be recognized for his Rising Star Award and also for receiving the MSBA Director's Award for his numerous hours participating in MSBA activities. Todd Anderson and Dr. Rose Chu will be recognized for completing the MSBA phases 1 through 4 training. So I do want to congratulate Rose, Curtis, and Todd on their accomplishments, and also want to congratulate Kitty, as she mentioned in her report and serving in that capacity that you were selected for. And then finally, as was Chair Boguszewski mentioned earlier, I will retire at the end of June, and serving on the ISD 623 team really has been quite an honor. I've met so many amazing students and dedicated educators. Our families and community members really are exceptional. So I look forward to the next 5 months. We have a lot of good work to do, so staying with the Roseville Area Schools family. And I extend my appreciation to the school board for the opportunity to serve as superintendent. So thank you.
Thank you, Aldo. And I think we're all feeling glad for you that you've been able to decide what you want to do and when you need to do it, but we will be very sad to see you go. So, I would expect that we'll probably get as much out of you as we can possibly squeeze over the next 5 months. So just only half jokingly, probably. But thank you very much. We do have a study session this evening. So why don't we adjourn the regular meeting and let's take a 3-minute break, knowing that will really be 5 minutes, and then plan to be back in 5 minutes and reconvene at the study session. And I was informed earlier we can just keep the same links and everything, just stay on and we'll just continue as a study session. So with that, we'll see y'all in 3